family life balance is super, super important. So the way for a successful vacation is to make sure you turn all of your alerts on while you're away from the office.
Hey everybody, before we start this episode, a quick shout out to our sponsors. Today's episode is brought to you by the Perfect RIA. How could it not be brought to you by the Perfect RIA? But if you enjoy these episodes, if you think that Micah and I, or at least Micah, have some great advice to give, head over to our website, theperfectria.com, and download one of our free guides towards making your practice better. So it's not just the things you hear on the podcast, it's the things that you implement. And if you're saying, you know what I'd really like to get in a room with Matt and Micah. I'd really like to ask them my own questions. I'd like to be coached by them. Then send an email to lifestyle@theperfectria.com, and one of our great team members will reach out to you and tell you more about the program. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Perfect RIA podcast. I'm your co-host, Matthew Jarvis, and with me, as usual, although not in his usual location, if in fact Micah has a usual location, Micah Shalansky. Micah, how are you, my friend?
But I'm just doing absolutely fantastic, enjoying some sunshine in Maui right now, but always glad to kind of carve out a little bit of time to jump on and do a pod with you.
That's a lot of fun. Now, for those of you that are geographically challenged, Alaska is not, in fact, next to Hawaii, despite how it shows up on every map. But that said, in the months of January, February, every Alaskan is in Hawaii. So while they may not be geographically close, it is basically the same place.
It's basically the same place. Exactly right. Alaska just leaves. And you actually know, Jarvis, this is really funny. A little Alaskan fact here. When I'm talking to other people in Alaska, they're like, oh, I'm going to Hawaii. Based on where they live in Alaska, I can tell you what island they're going to go to. Are they a big island person? Are they a Oahu, right? Do they like Maui? Is it Kauai? Yeah. So it's really funny how that kind of sets up.
Well, another interesting Alaska factoid, Mike, since we're talking about Alaska today, I just learned about the Alaskan-sized bed. Are you aware of this? That there's queen, king, cow king, and now there's an Alaskan king, which is about as big as Alaska. I was trying to measure my master bedroom, and I'm not sure it would fit, but I'm still going to get one. So it's like 3 feet wider, 3 feet longer. It's insane.
Holy crap.
I'll send everybody a link to it. Yeah, it's definitely a family bed. So, well, on that hard left turn, let's try to get to something useful here. I recently posted on my social media feed on LinkedIn, which is a lot of fun there. And I said, listen, if you're getting alerts on your phone, you are a fool. You're a fool if you're getting alerts on your phone. We had a lot of good interaction. And Michael, we really want to talk about this. There are some alerts that are appropriate to get on your phone, but we have to realize that beyond those couple of alerts, and we'll talk about those, every single other alert, and by alert, I mean a chime, a ding, a vibration, a buzz, a hum, a little red arrow, a number, anything like that, those are all absolutely destructive to your productivity and your mental well-being.
What about the damn flashing strobe that goes off on the phones, right? Geez, that's not only sound, but the flashlights. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Like all of those are just absolutely horrible. And you can justify anything, right? So this isn't like saying justify all of this. There's a reason you have those notifications turned on. There's a reason Apple, Google, whomever puts those notifications on, and it's not for your well-being. No. There's a great talk about dopamine. And Jarvis, when you and I were at the Genius Network, this lady gave a talk, and her book really talked about this as well, about how, Pavlov's dog, right? How we get trained by dopamine hits with these notifications. And so you really got to ask yourself, is this serving you? Is this building the type of life, the type of business that you want? And again, we can justify all day long why you need notifications. Now, the reality is you don't. And why do we know that? Because we've shut off almost every single one and our practice continues to grow. So clearly it's not needed. But you really got to separate these things out, and you got to have time for, okay, what's an acceptable notification? What's your team communication policy on how these notifications work? And then are you doing this, and how well does it trickle down to your team as well?
Yeah, let's pull on this thread just a little bit more, Mike. Of course, that book was Dopamine Nation, which is a phenomenal book to read. That's Another great book to read on this topic is the book Deep Work by Cal Newport. It's a pretty heavy book. I'm not sure I recommend trying to plow through the whole thing. But in both of these examples, they talk about in great detail that every time you get an alert on your phone, you are paying a price for that alert. So every alert has a price. And you can tell yourself that's not the case, Mike. As you pointed out, on one side of the screen is you, a human being. On the other side of the screen is literally endless resources, right? Billions of dollars are going into every screen to make them as addicting as possible. That's not a conspiracy. Like, you can read the financial statements from Apple, and you can see how many psychologists they have on staff and the MRI imaging that they're doing on people while they're reading these. So every alert, whether it's on your phone or your computer, has a price. Everything we talk about in the Perfect RIA is about being intentional. So you need to look and say, what is the price of this alert? And in fact, is the benefit worth the price, right? So if the only benefit you're getting is this cool dopamine high, like, oh, I have something to do. This is so exciting. I wonder what happened on Facebook. That is not worth the price. But there are some that are worth the price.
Amen. You know, Jarvis, one of the things that comes to mind is so often people will tell me that says, well, Micah, I have these alerts on, but it doesn't affect me. Right? And I'm like, okay, well, you're lying to yourself about other things as well, which, hey, equally guilty right here, right? Just saying. But I was working with somebody and it was really fascinating. And we talked about this before on the podcast. And she was very adamant that alerts did not bother her at all. And we were walking through something, a screen share, so she could walk through and explain how to do something. And she had her computer up. And it was so fascinating that as she was presenting this, she had alerts on her computer. And every time she was mid-sentence, an alert would pop up. She would stop. You could see her look over, check the alert, then come back and pause and like, where was I? Oh, and then they'll go back to it. And so this happened like 5 or 6 times. And I was on mute. I was very intentional about not saying anything because I wanted to see if like she would have this, because we just had this conversation about alerts. And then she looked at us, she's like, holy crap, these are distracting me. I never realized how much this is pulling me off track. I was like, yeah. I was like, and these are just the ones you're thinking about right now. So these alerts, again, no matter what they are, they're intended. I mean, think about it. It's an alert. It's intended to grab you from wherever you are, pull you out of that to let you know about something else, which again, we're going to talk about positive ways to use these alerts, but by default, they're extremely negative and harmful.
Yeah, right. And some alerts obviously make sense, like the alert on my smoke detector, not the low battery one. That person needs to die a horrible death. But the alert that my house is on fire, that's a good alert. Like I want that. I want my focus to be broken. The alert that my wife is calling me, I want my focus to be broken because that's a high priority item. The alert that an email came in that's most likely spam, not a high priority. An alert that the phone is ringing at the office, not a high priority, right? And this is where we see this goes to time management. If you want to spend your time managing alerts, you just simply can't get to a higher level of productivity. You just can't at all. If you say, hey, listen, I want to be running a multi-million-dollar practice. I want to deliver that kind of value to clients. Your time cannot be spent managing what are meaningless alerts.
You know, Jarvis, over the Christmas holiday, one of the things that we were talking to someone about is they were like, I can't believe it. Over one weekend, my phone was just blowing up with all these emails that were coming in. And it was really distracting me from family time. And she was complaining about all of these emails. And it was like, wait, hold on a second. You're complaining about someone sending you mail, but you're choosing when to check that mail. No, my phone is blowing up. Because you chose to turn notifications on for your work email over Christmas. That's on you. That's not on somebody sending you an email, right? The whole purpose of email is I can send it to you at any time I want, regardless of when it is, and it shouldn't disturb you. And if it does, that's on you. That's not on me whatsoever. So the fact that her weekend was destroyed because her notifications from work was going off had nothing to do with work. It was 100% their personal decisions to allow notifications to be on versus just shutting them off.
So let's talk about some tools on how to improve this, right? We always like to say one of our mantras is, if willpower were enough, we wouldn't need to have this discussion. We have yet to do a podcast episode dedicated solely to putting your socks on before you go to work. Maybe someday we'll need to, but most advisors we talk to are fairly reliable about putting their socks on before they go to work, unless you're those hipsters that don't wear socks. I don't get that. When it comes to phones, again,
I'm not wearing socks right now, but that could be just I'm in Hawaii, but whatever.
Could be Hawaii. When you're going against alerts, you are going against one of the biggest superpowers that the universe has ever seen, right? And so to think like, hey, I'm just going to ignore those, that is not reality. So let's talk about how you can reduce those. Micah, I remember on several occasions watching you, for advisors we were coaching, delete email off their phone, not delete an email, delete the entire email account. And to this advisor's credit that's coming to mind, she was very grateful for it, but I think her hands were literally shaking, right? Like the dopamine withdrawals, her hands were trembling as you were deleting the account off her phone. Why were we deleting the account off her phone? Because she had mentioned that whenever she's around her family or home or anywhere, she's constantly checking email, because even without the alerts, couldn't resist the draw of the dopamine. Now we could say like, hey, I should be a stronger person. I should. You're just not. And it's okay. Delete it off your phone. So this example of the person who their weekend was quote unquote ruined because they were getting email alerts, that's the type of person that cannot have their work email on their phone. End of story. You just don't. It's like an alcoholic. If you're an alcoholic, you should not go to a bar. You shouldn't go to the bar and be like, oh, I just will have a couple drinks. No. At that point in life, you cannot be anywhere near it, right? Dopamine's the same way, if not worse.
Now, Jarvis, there's different levels of this, right? On how you need to apply it, right? Because we're all different. But when I went through this process first, mine was elimination. It wasn't reduction, right? Just reducing it did not work for me. Now, once I got off of those dopamine hits and emails, this is now a different story. But when it first started, it was 100% elimination. There was no email on my phone. There was no work stuff on there. It was like, nope, we're going to eliminate as much of this as we possibly can. And I was going to, now we'll talk about like how to solve this. It's not me never doing work ever. It's having a place for it. But I had to completely eliminate it because I was just as guilty as the next person about opening up my phone, checking my iPad, checking everything else for what email was coming in. And then the worst thing that can happen is you can get an email in from a client that you can't fix right away. And now all you're doing is thinking about that email that you can't do anything about. And for me, that just drives me absolutely nuts. But I know when I have a scheduled time on Tuesdays, I'll meet with my team. We'll review the emails that are on there. I'm going to review them and solve them right then. I feel very positive about email because I know when I'm going to get to it. And it's not this nebulous thing that, holy crap, lurking behind the corner, some email that I'm going to get that's going to derail everything I'm doing.
You know, if you're listening to this episode and you're thinking that's not me, like I get that Jarvis and Micah must know some real clowns, like, but that's not me. Here's a test for all of us to do. And I have to test myself on this on a regular basis. If you ever tell yourself, hey, I didn't have time to get to whatever that is, prospecting, implementing Surge, listening to the Perfect RIA podcast, whatever that is, I didn't have time to get to that. Grab your phone, especially if you have an iPhone, go over to screen time and tell me what the screen time number is, right? So you say, hey, I didn't have time. Like, you know, I didn't have time. Then you go look at the screen time for the week and it's like 18 hours. Like, so for this week, you held that phone for 18 hours. You didn't even show you how many times you picked it up. You're like, you looked at the phone for 18 hours. You picked it up 4,000 times. Okay, but you didn't have time to implement a prospect process, right? It's the same as somebody who tells me like they can't stay at a healthy weight and they're drinking Coca-Cola. I'm like, wait a second, there may be some other issues here. Let's quit with the Coca-Cola first. So we got to just, I agree with you, Micah, limit. I knew an advisor, an attorney actually, he kept his email on a separate computer on a separate standing desk because he's like, Jarvis, I can't. Anytime I had work to do, anytime I had a deposition to write or whatever, he says, I would go and I would check my emails and I would go browse the attorney online forums. He said, so I had my assistant put it on a separate computer where there's not a chair. So if I need to take care of email, I have to walk across the room, stand there and take care of it. And should he have the willpower to not need to do that? Maybe, but he was a very successful attorney because he understood what his weaknesses were.
That's the key right there. Understand what your weaknesses are and how do I get a hack in there in order to solve these, right? So email has to be gone. Let's talk about social, right? Social, gone. All of those things. Instant messages, absolutely not. This is another thing that's going to come up as well is the team feels that instant message, hey, if somebody's messaging me, I have to respond immediately to it. Well, this is where that team communication policy comes in is because of what level of communication is this, right? You know, base level is email. Then it's going to be meetings, right? Then it's kind of that IM messages, right? Then it's a kind of a phone call saying, hey, this is a 911. But we got to have times that we know when we're checking instant messages and when we're not checking instant messages. It's not okay for me to expect my team to always be on their instant messages and checking it, right? I should know when the team is checking these. And now I can make a decision. If I send them a message, do I need to get a response sooner than X PM? Right? Whatever time zone they're checking it. Do I need to get a response sooner than that? Is it an emergency? If so, then it's a phone call. If not, it needs to be able to wait till that time.
Now, Micah, in your office, you guys created a really great communications policy that really breaks that down. Like, what is a 911 emergency? And that's, of course, available to the members of the Backstage Pass and our Invictus program. You can find that on the portal. But Micah, we just talked before we hit record on this of a couple of examples where people took this too far, where they got rid of too many things from their phone. And that is, in fact, a line. So would you give us that example that we were chatting about?
Yeah, I was talking to an advisor the other day, and he was really working on it. He wanted to keep a separation, right, between work and personal, but he's run into a couple of issues. But one of the things, he would have no work items whatsoever on his phone. He only had one phone, so he didn't do the two ones, but he only had one phone, so he had no work items. But then the problem is sometimes a commute would happen, travel issues would happen, and he wouldn't have access to his calendar. So I was like, well, hold on a second. Why don't you put your calendar on your personal phone? He's like, no, Micah, I'm keeping them separated so my personal life doesn't get involved. I said, hey, I appreciate that. And don't put email in there. Fine. Don't put IM on there. Fine. Right. Don't put your CRM in there. Fine. Calendar. Boy, for me, that's a tough one. So much of what we do revolves around our calendar, not having your business calendar, your personal device. This seems punitive, right? Where you're not actually helping. What I'm solving for is I don't want those notifications. I'm solving for I don't want my life interrupted by random messages that are coming in. The calendar doesn't do that. The calendar is set times I need to be there. So this is actually the one alert, Jarvis, I like on my computer, is a calendar alert for appointments, and it dings 5 minutes before the appointment. A second type of alert that I'll use is hack from you is a stopwatch, right? if I'm going to work in a project, it's amazing how much deep work I can get in when I use this tool. I have a stopwatch that I will just turn it on and I will run it because maybe I have a gap in time between my next appointment. And I really want head down work, but I'm worried I'm going to miss my appointment time. When I don't use a timer for this, I'm constantly looking up, checking the clock, and I'm not really getting into my deep work. When I set the timer that I have an X amount of time to do this, I shut everything else up and I work. I get in such deep work, Jarvis, that the timer, when it goes off, it scares the crap out of me. I'm like, holy crap. Oh, all right. Now it's on to the next thing, right? But that really tells me that I was really committed to providing lots of value in whatever this work was. Now it's time for me to pivot. So a calendar for notification timer, those are notifications I like because they're alerts intended to change my activity. Text messages, not the case.
Yeah, thanks for the reminder on the timer. That's actually one I forgot. I use that quite a bit though. Anytime there's a time I need to remember, and like you said, I catch myself, and even with family time, my son Calvin, who's 13, says, "Hey Dad, let's build Legos." Cool, I can do that, but I have a thing at 7:30. So what I would do before is every couple minutes, I'm looking up at the clock. What time is it? Oh yeah, let me just set a timer for 7:20. That way when it goes off, I know I got a couple minutes to wrap up and I don't have to think about it. On that note of having your work calendar, this is one of those places where it feels like you're crossing the line between personal and family, but it actually makes your family life better. Because let's say this is the real world. You get up at 6 o'clock and one of your kids is throwing up. You know what? That happens. That's real life. If you have your work calendar on your calendar, you can look and you can say, you know what? My first meeting's not until 10. Let me message the office. Let them know I got a sick kid. I'm going to be in at 9. If you don't know what's going on, right? You don't know that, like, hey, I got a meeting right at 8. I don't have time to stay and take care of this, or I need to call someone and reschedule, right? That's just getting closer to reality life. So you and I, Michael, we take a hard line on a lot of things, but life still happens. We still have 6 kids. You wake up, there's snow outside, or there's something that's going on. Those things just happen, and having that information is invaluable.
The opposite is true as well. I like the personal stuff on the work calendar as well, right? Yep. Because the team needs to be able to see when they can book things and when they can't. And when you have gaps in your calendar and things aren't booked, team members will naturally think, oh, they have nothing going on right now. We can fill that time. Now, it could be you're on an airplane, because that's happened to me, and I've had appointments be booked and I'm on an airplane and I'm like, what the hell, guys? I'm traveling. They're like, oh, well, it wasn't on the calendar. There was a note that I was traveling that day, right? But magically they just thought it was some other time than the time that they needed to schedule. So actually on the calendar, it has when my trips are going to be, when I need to travel to the airport, when I can't have appointments, etc. You could think this is going too far, but as our team grows more and more, allowing individuals to make decisions, they got to be able to see good information. So really important to provide that. And that's when you're getting personal stuff on there. Had another advisor, he had a lot of personal commitments with family and he was having lots of issues with calendaring. We dove into it and he wasn't putting his personal stuff on his work calendar. I'm like, dude, put it on there. He says, no, I got to keep them separated. I was like, you're doing this to your detriment. This isn't serving you. This isn't helping you, right? What are we trying to do? We're trying to be intentional of when is work time, when is family time. Okay, you're not being intentional about this because you're not communicating between those two sides. When is what time? And it's creating a conflict. So you need to have that one calendar that shows this is all of your stuff going on. So the team knows it. He did it. And all of a sudden, all those problems went away because they could see what was happening.
I love that. All right. Well, speaking of time blocking, let's pause 1 second for a quick word from our sponsors. When we come back, I actually want to share, Mike, I didn't even share this one with you, a real victory from one of our advisors who owned that he was struggling with his calendar and asked for some help. So let's pause for 1 minute for a word from our sponsors and we'll come back for that. Hey everybody, today's episode is brought to you by our friends at Belay. The best part of having a virtual assistant from Belay is not the things that they get done that you were already going to do. That is valuable, by the way. It's that list of things that, if we're being honest, you need to get to and you're just never going to get it done. Like that doctor's appointment you keep meaning to schedule, or the contractor you need to find for your house to fix that leaky thing, or the flowers you keep meaning to send to your wife. Those are all things that you can give your Belay virtual assistant so that they get done, because we know that, if we're being honest, they're probably not going to get done. Now, how are they going to get done? Because Belay finds virtual assistants, including my own virtual assistant, who are masters at working down task lists. They're masters at taking one step ahead of what you're already thinking, right? Reach out to Belay, text the letters RIA to 55123 to get a free copy of their ebook. More importantly, to get introduced to my good friend Teresa, who's going to see if you're a good fit for a virtual assistant. Not everyone is. And then find a virtual assistant who's perfectly matched to your needs. So text the letters RIA to 55123. And now back to the episode. All right, Micah. Well, thank you to our sponsors for keeping our show going strong. So, Micah, one of the advisors in our team, we were having our weekly team stand-up, and he said, hey, listen to Colleen, who's been my office manager for 13 years. He said, hey, Colleen, I've been working on this project. He's working on getting a designation. He says, I just keep kicking the can on this. Will you sit down with me and help me set up a calendar for the next 3 months to make sure that I actually get this done? Now, mad shout out to this team member because right, you're recognizing like, hey, I'm weak in this area. And I know contrary to popular belief, there's this belief out there, Micah, that you and I have no weaknesses. Now that belief might just be here in these heads, these two egos, but we all have these areas where we really struggle, right? And so this team member, he says, like, this is where I struggle. I get to the end of each week and I haven't worked on this project. And so he sat down with Chloe, went to somebody he trusted, somebody who's good, who has experience in that area, and said, help me, and then help me be accountable here. This is why, Mike, our masterminds are so critical. Our coaching program is so critical, right? Because again, if you were going to get it done, you would have gotten it done. And if you're saying, hey, I'm not getting this done, this could be fee increases, it could be graduating clients. We helped several advisors, Micah, this last year leave an unhealthy broker-dealer relationship, raise their fees. And we're talking like millions and millions and millions of dollars of increased revenue, something they knew about for years. One advisor, Micah, 6 years it took us to talk him into that thing. And now he's texting, he's like, man, I'm doing so much better now than I was before. So if you have areas, whether it's calendar or alert, where you're not reliable and you know it's holding back your success, find somebody who can kick you in the pants and make that happen.
Jarvis, this is a good time to put some distinctions in here, right? Between
Please, Micah.
Making excuses and getting help. These are two different things, right?
Yeah.
So an excuse is like, oh, well, I didn't do this because this happened and blah, blah, blah. And basically what I'm doing is I'm using some other event not to take responsibility for me not getting my job done. That's an excuse. Now, a situation is going to be, hey, I didn't get X done. I'm not reliable for this. I need help to solve this problem. You're taking onus and responsibility for it, but you're reaching out and saying, hey guys, look, this is stupid. I know I should be able to do it. I can't. I need a little bit of help to structure this and get this set up. That's ownership, right? And that's taking charge in it. So that's not giving an excuse to why something didn't get done. Now, if that team member came up and never got their designation done and said, well, I never ran into it and I had all this, I couldn't have the time and these things came up and blah, blah, that's an excuse. Sitting down with somebody and saying, help me create a plan for this to be successful, mad props to that, getting it done.
Michael, let's talk a couple more things. We were mentioning about travel. We were mentioning about family calendars and business calendars. So a couple of things that you and I have learned the hard way. One is that if you're traveling for any personal business, whatever, it needs to be on all of your calendars, right? So you and I maintain several calendars because we work in several companies, but let's just say you had a business calendar and a personal calendar. It's really key that your flights be on both calendars, right? And same with just kind of as a general rule, if I ever have a work thing that's past about 5 p.m., that has to also be on my personal calendar. And if I ever have a family thing that's before about 5 p.m., that needs to also be on my business calendar, plus buffers, right? So if, let's say I have a doctor's appointment, and this might seem silly to some of you because you got this. Let's say I have a doctor's appointment at 2 p.m. Well, unless I leave the office at 2 p.m. and come back at 3 p.m., I need to block out more time for that, right? Otherwise, the team will inevitably schedule a call for me at 1:30 when I had planned to leave. I can't assume that the team's going to magically know how long it takes me to get to the doctor. Those things need to be put on there, right? It's all about just empowering your team.
Yeah, 100%. Those buffer times need to be on there. That just helps everyone be super successful in getting this done. The other thing Jarvis talked about on the vacation side of it as well, one of the things that took me a little while is figuring out how to shift gears when getting in vacation, right? Especially because one of my forcing mechanisms early on with Surge is I wouldn't stop working. So we just planned a trip right afterwards, right? In order to force me to get out of the office, which worked out really, really well. But then shifting gears was really hard. I magically thought when I got on that airplane, when I did everything, I'd be able to drop all the work, I'd be able to let it go, and everything would be fine. But reality is that isn't the case. It takes a couple of days for me to shift gears to get more in that vacation mode. So when I was first doing this, it was really painful for the family. Then we just embraced it. That says, hey, it takes me longer to shift gears. This is the reason I love Surge. It takes me longer to shift gears into work mode as well. But once I'm in there, man, I'm in high speed, I'm up and running. And so now we just plan those first couple of days that on vacation saying, I know the office is going to need me. I know things are going to come up. We have that scheduled in there so I can be successful in this transition into vacation mode. Then we also have says, okay, how long are we going to be gone? We're going to be gone over a month. Okay, here's what I know. After about 10 days of being unplugged, I am itching to look at stuff in the office and to have some creative juices flowing. And if I don't scratch that itch, I am not a delight to be around. I know it's a shocker to people. I'm always wonderful to be around. But I'm not from a family perspective. So now when we have these trips that are booked, like we're going to go walk the Camino, we're going to be gone for 5-6 weeks. And when we do that, we're going to have certain times that says, nope, I just need to carve out some time where I can talk with my team. I can do things. They probably don't need me, but I need that interaction in this intervals. So we just plan that in the vacation. That allows me to check that box. Then I can move on and I can be a better husband, a better father in vacation time.
Yeah, that's a good example to share, Micah, because that was something that surprised me when you and I first met each other, which now is some 7 years ago. Right, because at the time I was a big Dan Sullivan strategic coach. Free days, right? Dan is very adamant that free days are zero work, not even thinking about work. Right now, again, we have to understand that some of that is an idealistic, like framework to use. But you oftentimes have this rule for yourself. If I want to get up and I work before the family gets up and going, then that's okay time. And at first I thought, well, that's a violation of a free day. But then it was a step back and say, wait a second, what are we solving for? If that gives you a healthy outlet, an intentional outlet to say there's things I want to get done each day for my own well-being, should we meditate our way out of that? Maybe, I don't know, someday. But for now, we're saying, hey, if I'm gone for 2 weeks, I need a half day where I can go find an office space and I can work. It also helps with this need of setting your phone down, right? So great, whatever alerts come up, whatever things come up, I've got time this Friday from 9 a.m. to 11 to work on whatever comes up. And this is a good Tim Ferriss fear setting exercise. All right, what alerts am I getting throughout the day that are so critical that if they waited until the end of the day or the end of the week, it would blow something up?
Which there's just so much we could kind of dive in more into this. But I know you had some good comments that came back on your LinkedIn page. And I'd like to address some of those.
Yeah, we did.
Because some people were saying that says, hey, some of these notifications are good. Don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. But let's press into these on both sides of it, right? And let's actually see if these are good alerts or not.
Yeah, so let's use one. Kevin Thompson, who's Kevin, I really appreciate your comments on LinkedIn. Always a lot of fun. He says, well, yes and no. My phone alerts me when I receive DocuSigns or client communications I may have forgotten throughout the day. I agree that not all notifications are equal, but let's not throw the baby out with the bathwater.
Yeah, I was just going to interrupt real quick. I was like, so you're on a date night with your wife, right? You finally got a babysitter for the kids. You're out. It's a romantic evening. And then you didn't sign something. So it's 7 o'clock. You're at a fancy restaurant. My phone goes off. And now I'm going to turn around. I'm going to pick up my phone. I'm looking at my phone right now. Oh, there's a DocuSign. 1 second, sweetie. And I'm going to log, damn it, I need 2-factor authentication. I'm going to log in and sign this. Okay, what were we talking about again? Yeah, let me know how that's going to go that evening for you, right? I don't think we're actually solving for anything really good on that notification. Now, you could say that's an extreme example, but that's a real life example of what can happen with these notifications. So, Kevin, my pushback on this one would be, is that really ideal? Or would it be more ideal to set up a time that you have scheduled with your team on when to review these, when to sign things, and when to get it done? And you shouldn't be receiving most of the client communication. Your team should be.
Yeah, that's a great example, Micah. And again, Kevin, so I love your feedback on this, Kevin. So if you say, hey, I have a leaving the office checklist, which Micah, you and I do on a routine basis. Hey, before I leave the office, I'm going to check in with the team. Anything that didn't get taken care of. And I actually had I had this exact scenario last week. I was checking out with the team, calling and says, hey, just a quick reminder before you leave, please go open your email and take care of it. Literally a DocuSign. It was literally a DocuSign because that's her job to stay on top of. So yeah, that's a great one. And the trick is, Kevin, too, oftentimes we say, hey, I'm only getting alerts for mission critical things. The software is not that smart. We end up getting alerts from a lot of things. There was one from Andrew. I wasn't aware of this, Michael. You were aware of this. You were using this. That Apple has a scheduled summary where it will kind of like pool all your alerts together and give them to you at the end of the day or at a set time. Tell us about that.
So I use that at, especially I haven't figured out how to use it off search successfully. So I'd love some feedback if other people will, but during search, I use it really good. It gives me all my notifications right at 4 p.m. My last appointment's at 3. I'm generally wrapping up about 3:55, 4 o'clock. But what I like about it, Jarvis, is then all of a sudden my D&D turns off. I get a summary of all my notifications and it's like pulling me that says, hey, now is time to wrap up work mode and start working your way home. So that's my almost alarm. Otherwise, I like my work, right? I love my family, but I still like my work. I can get wrapped up in staying longer in search hours, which is not productive. It turns into playing office. And so this is a good alert that pops up. I get to see my friend messages. I get to see family text messages. Big, all right, this is what I'm working for. Now I need to transition to this. And I make it a good rule that I got these notifications, which are driving me nuts because I want to know what's happening in these chats, but I don't get to play with them until I get my stuff done. Is all my dictation done for the day? Have I outlined all of the tasks? Have I done all the follow-up? Have I done my daily checkout that I do internally to prepare me for the next day, right? And basically what that is making sure I've done my stuff for today, cleared out my entire calendar. Then I write down really quickly what are the key things that have to get done tomorrow on a piece of paper. And that's just really powerful for me to debrief that, then I can transition into more family personal mode.
I love that. All right, I got to share one more before we hit wrap. This is from Jose Antonio, and this is a great one. He says, I love how compassionate you are when sharing your recommendations, smiley face. In all seriousness, appreciate the direct recommendations. Our phones can paralyze our productivity, and we need to take steps to avoid undesirable behavior and distractions. Now, Jose, I'm glad you've noticed this. In fact, everyone seems to notice this. There's sometimes where you need a hug and a pat on the back, and there's sometimes you need a kick in the pants. And Mike, I wish I could learn a lot. I learned many lessons from getting a hug and a pat on the back. Most of my lessons were from a swift kick in the pants or letting things get so out of control. Like, actually, here's an example on alerts. One time when I was a Boy Scout leader, this was several years ago, for Halloween, one of the Boy Scouts, he was like 16, dressed up as me for Halloween. And so he got like a bald cap on, and he got from Jackie like one of my Jarvis Financial shirts and my name tag and stuff. But then the deal cincher was he spent the whole Halloween party looking at his phone. That was part of the costume. Was he wouldn't even make eye contact with anybody. He just stared at his phone and walked around the whole time. And for him, this was like a funny thing. And it was a funny thing, but it was this real like kick in the pants of like, oh no, that's actually how I'm doing my life. I'm just walking around staring at my phone the entire time. This was like early days of cell phones. This wasn't even like iPhones at this point. So yeah, Jose, sometimes we need a real hard kick in the pants.
You know, Jose, and on that compassionate side too, right? Sure, Jarvis may not be understanding the sympathy with somebody, but it comes from a place of knowing this before. But also, let's not get too sensitive in this current weak culture. This is seriously about looking at this. And I'm going to say it is not compassionate to allow someone to walk down a bad path when you can see them. They're walking towards a cliff and you can see it and they're on their phone, but you're not going to say anything. That's compassionate. Yeah. That's understanding. That's nice. You could say, Mike, it's not the same thing. Oh, hell yes, this is the exact 100%. Same thing, right? This dopamine addiction is very serious, and especially with kids and all of these things that we're seeing it. And so calling this out is absolutely required, right? Now, if you disagree, you have a different opinion, rock on. What is it? Show evidence that this thing works, not because I feel good when I do it. We shouldn't be following the feel-good receptors when we're doing things. Otherwise, people on coke are making good decisions with their life, and they're not.
Yeah. Oh boy, Mike, we could do a whole podcast on this. I was reading the book, The Myth of Normal, and they're talking about this. They're talking about giving kids Ritalin, right, for this ADHD diagnosis, right? Which the way that works, well, check this out. The way it works is it floods your dopamine receptors. And so you're giving this stimulant and it slows their brain down because they've overwhelmed all the dopamine receptors. And Gabe Matar, I forget his name, he says that's the same. Saying that a kid with ADD has a dopamine deficiency is like saying an alcoholic has a whiskey deficiency. Again, this guy's a psychiatrist. He worked in addiction clinics in Canada. And he says, saying that somebody has a dopamine deficiency is like an alcoholic having a whiskey deficiency. Because the alcoholic feels a lot better when he gets the whiskey. That doesn't mean he has a whiskey deficiency. So yeah, we can't screw around with this stuff. This dopamine stuff is real deal. And it's being wildly exploited. Yeah. So, Michael,
Jarvis, I do appreciate this, but I have a lava flow deficiency right now being on the islands. So on that note, what are some action items?
Yeah, let's talk about action items. All right. So action item number 1. Right now, pull out your iPhone. If you don't have an iPhone, I don't know what you're doing, man. I can't help it. I'm sure somewhere in a Google phone it's there. Go to notifications.
You have green text messages? Really? Green text messages? You're that guy? All right.
Yeah, go to notifications, turn off all those damn notifications, all of them. They do not be on, not just like the little red arrows, turn them all off. Exception can be phone call and text messages from your wife and kids, or spouse and kids. Like that's it. Turn everything else off. Next week or in 2 weeks, you can go back and turn back on the ones that you legitimately missed. But for now, turn them all off.
Yeah, by legitimately missed, like it caused a fire in your office when you missed that. Right. If it didn't cause that then you didn't legitimate medicine.
Not the alert that the mailman dropped something off on your porch. That is not something that you need an alert for.
You know what? Delegate and elevate these things, right? So if you are, and going back to, I forget the gentleman's name, maybe Keith. But if you have this concern that says, hey, I'm getting DocuSign notifications or client communication, that is a team member should be engaging with this. I'm not saying it's a lower level task. It's very important for the team to take care of. You need to set a time on your calendar when you will be reviewing this. Your team needs to have already reviewed it through your inbox. They pulled everything together so you can be hyper effective going through and signing things, not hunting, pecking, and finding freaking DocuSigns and emails or having to get text notifications or any types of notifications on when clients email in.
I love it. Last action items, of course. Be sure to like and subscribe. Give it 5 stars. Really helps the podcast out. We do have our next power session. Our webinar for the entire nation is on February 21st, just as we're kicking off our Invictus Mastermind at the same time. And be sure to stay tuned for a final word from our sponsors.
Awesome. Jarvis, until next time, happy planning.
Happy planning. Hey, everybody. I want you to take a quick look around your office. And on your desk, there should be the Retirement Tax Services Desktop Tax Guide. And if it's not there, or if it's not current, meaning you didn't download it in the last month, go to retirementtaxservices.com and download the Desktop Tax Guide. This is a must-have resource for every financial advisor committed to tax planning.
Information designed to change lives. Financial planning can make you thrive. Start today, don't think twice.